Carole King is not just a name in music history. Carole King is a statistic, a benchmark, a figure tied to numbers that still haven't been matched. Over 75 million records sold. One album, Tapestry, sitting on charts for years. Decades of influence compressed into piano chords and unfiltered lyrics. Now she lives quietly. Slower. More isolated. Fewer public appearances. A body that doesn't move the way it used to. A voice that, while still recognizable, carries the weight of time. There is no dramatic collapse. No single catastrophic moment. Just a slow narrowing of life. Less travel. More isolation. The quiet erosion that comes with age. Carole King didn't arrive at fame by accident. She was built for it early, shaped by discipline, talent, and an environment that rewarded precision. Born Carole Joan Klein in 1942 in Brooklyn, New York, she grew up in a household that valued education and stability. Her mother was a teacher. Her father worked as a firefighter. There was structure, expectations, a sense that success came through effort, not luck. Music entered her life almost clinically. Piano lessons at age 4. Perfect pitch identified early. She didn't just enjoy music. She processed it. Patterns, harmonies, structure. By her teenage years, she wasn't just playing songs. She was understanding them. At school, she wasn't the loudest presence. Not the most socially dominant. But she was observant, focused. She skipped a grade. She absorbed information quickly. That same efficiency would later define her songwriting. By the late 1950s, she was already experimenting with composing, not as a hobby but as a system. Chords, melodies, lyrics, assembled with intention. At Queen's College, she met Gerry Goffin. That meeting would alter the trajectory of her life, both professionally and personally. They married young. Too young by most standards. But in the early 1960s, that wasn't unusual. What was unusual was what they built together. A songwriting partnership that would quietly dominate the American music charts. They worked out of the Brill Building, a place that functioned less like an artistic sanctuary and more like a production facility. Writers in small rooms. Pianos against the walls. Deadlines. Expectations. Output. King wrote the music. Goffin wrote the lyrics. It was efficient, structured, productive. Will You Love Me Tomorrow? That was the breakthrough. Recorded by the Shirelles. It reached #1. A teenage girl's vulnerability expressed with unusual clarity. It wasn't just a hit, it was a shift in how young emotions were presented in pop music. More followed. Take Good Care of My Baby. The Locomotion. Up on the Roof. Each song carefully constructed. Accessible, memorable, commercially effective. But behind the productivity, there were fractures. The marriage was unstable. Infidelity, emotional distance, pressure from constant work. They were producing hits at a relentless pace, but the personal cost was accumulating. By the mid-1960s, the cracks were visible. Goffin struggled with mental health. There were affairs. The partnership that worked so cleanly on paper became volatile in practice. Carole King kept working. That was her response. Maintain output. Maintain structure. Keep the system running. But eventually, the marriage collapsed. Divorce followed. And with it, a shift in identity. 4 years, she had been part of a unit. A behind-the-scenes force. Not the face. Not the performer. Just the creator. That would change in the next phase of her life. She moved to California. Laurel Canyon. A different environment. Less industrial. More introspective. Artists writing for themselves, not just for the market. It wasn't an immediate transformation. She wasn't suddenly a confident performer. In fact, performing made her uncomfortable. She preferred the controlled environment of songwriting rooms. But the industry was changing. Singer-songwriters were becoming central figures. Authenticity was becoming a selling point. James Taylor played a role in that shift. So did others in that circle. They encouraged her, pushed her toward the microphone. Her first solo album, Writer, didn't explode commercially. It was a transition, a test. The voice was there, but the identity wasn't fully formed yet. Then came 1971. Tapestry. The album wasn't designed to dominate the charts. It wasn't engineered for mass appeal in the way Brill Building songs had been. It was personal, direct, minimal production, focused on voice and piano. It worked beyond expectations. The album stayed at #1 for 15 consecutive weeks. It became one of the best-selling albums of all time. Songs like It's Too Late, I Feel the Earth Move, and You've Got a Friend weren't just popular, they were embedded into the culture. The shift was complete. She was no longer just a songwriter. She was the voice. But success didn't eliminate instability. Fame brought a different kind of pressure. Visibility, expectations, touring, interviews, public scrutiny. She wasn't naturally suited for that environment. She adapted, but it required effort. Relationships remained complicated. Multiple marriages followed. Some short-lived, some more stable, but none without strain. Financially, there were peaks. Significant earnings from album sales, royalties, performances, but also fluctuations. Investments that didn't always yield consistent returns. The music industry itself was evolving, changing how artists were compensated. Through the 1970s and 1980s, she continued to produce music. Some albums performed well. Others didn't match the scale of Tapestry. That kind of success is difficult to replicate. Statistically unlikely. By the 1990s, the industry had shifted again. New genres, new production styles, different audience expectations. She adapted selectively. Less output, more focus on legacy, occasional performances, collaborations, recognition for past work, awards accumulated, Grammys, honors, inductions, acknowledgement of influence. But the pace slowed, and that brings the narrative closer to the present. Because the story at 84 isn't about chart positions or awards. It's about time. What remains? What fades? What persists? The woman who once wrote songs for others to sing is now part of history. Documented, studied, remembered. But she is also still here. Living the quiet, less visible side of a life that was once extremely public. The contrast is stark, and it sets the stage for what comes next. Success creates a distorted timeline. The public remembers peaks, hit songs, award shows, stadium performances. What it doesn't track as closely is the gradual shift that follows. For Carole King, that shift didn't happen overnight. It was incremental, almost procedural. After the peak of the early 1970s, she continued working. Albums like Music and Rhymes and Reasons performed well, though none reached the scale of Tapestry. That wasn't failure. It was normalization. The industry had recalibrated around her previous success, and anything less seemed diminished by comparison. Touring became part of her routine. Not something she initially sought, but something she learned to manage. Stage presence wasn't instinctive. It was developed. Repetition reduced anxiety. Familiarity replaced hesitation. But constant touring introduced fatigue. Travel, scheduling, performance demands. These accumulate over time, especially for someone who built her career in controlled environments. Her personal life remained complex. Relationships formed and dissolved. There was a pattern: connection, intensity, instability, separation. Not unusual in the entertainment industry, but still consequential. She married multiple times. Each relationship carried expectations that weren't always sustainable under the pressures of fame and work. There were attempts at stability, but consistency proved difficult. At the same time, she was raising children, balancing career demands with parenting responsibilities. That balance was imperfect. Like many artists of her era, work often took priority. Financially, the narrative wasn't linear. Royalties from songwriting provided a steady stream of income, but the structure of music rights is complex. Ownership, publishing deals, contracts from earlier decades, all of these influenced long-term earnings. There were periods of strong financial security, and periods where decisions, investments, partnerships, changing industry models, created uncertainty. The late 1970s and early 1980s marked another transition. Musical trends shifted toward more produced, electronic sounds. Her style, piano-driven, introspective, was less aligned with mainstream demand. She adapted selectively. Some albums incorporated contemporary elements. Others stayed closer to her original style. The results were mixed. By the mid-1980s, her visibility had decreased. Not entirely. She was still known, still respected, but no longer at the center of the industry. That shift can be difficult. For artists accustomed to constant attention, the reduction in visibility often creates identity challenges. Who are you when you're no longer at the peak? Carole King approached it pragmatically. She reduced output, focused on projects that felt relevant to her, participated in events that honored her legacy. In the 1990s, she began to re-emerge in a different context, not as a chart-dominating artist, but as a respected figure in music history. Collaborations with younger artists, appearances at major events, recognition from institutions. The narrative had shifted from current star to enduring influence. That shift brought a different kind of stability, less pressure to produce commercially successful work, more freedom to engage selectively. But aging introduces its own set of variables. Physical changes, reduced stamina, health considerations. These are not dramatic in isolation, but cumulative over time. Her performances became less frequent. Tours were shorter, appearances more controlled. Then there were external factors. The music industry's transition to digital formats, changes in revenue streams, the decline of album sales, the rise of streaming. For legacy artists, this creates a paradox. Their work remains widely consumed, but the financial structure is different. Royalties from streaming are typically lower than traditional sales models. That doesn't erase income, but it alters scale and predictability. At the same time, her catalog remained valuable. Licensing deals, re-releases, continued use of her songs in film, television, and advertising. These provided ongoing relevance. She also engaged in activism, environmental causes, political involvement. These became more prominent as her music output decreased. It wasn't a reinvention, more of a reallocation of focus. By the 2010s, her public appearances were increasingly tied to recognition events, awards, honors, retrospectives. The Broadway musical based on her life introduced her work to a new generation. That extended her cultural relevance without requiring constant personal output. But behind the public narrative, the private reality continued to evolve. Aging isn't just physical. It's cognitive, emotional, social. Friends pass away. Collaborators disappear. The network that once defined your daily life becomes smaller. For someone whose career was built on collaboration, that reduction can feel significant. There's also the question of memory. Not in a clinical sense necessarily, but in how past experiences are processed over time. Success, failure, relationships, revisited with distance. At 84, the rhythm of life is different. Slower, more deliberate. Daily routines replace constant movement. Reflection replaces production. This is where the public narrative often disconnects from reality. People imagine a legacy artist living in constant celebration of their past, surrounded by recognition, replaying successes. The reality is more neutral, sometimes quiet to the point of isolation. Carole King spends much of her time away from the spotlight, not because she's forgotten, but because the structure of her life no longer requires visibility. There are still interviews, occasional appearances, but they are spaced out, controlled, limited. Health plays a role, as it does for anyone in their 80s. Energy levels fluctuate. Recovery takes longer. Physical limitations become more noticeable. None of this is unique. That's the point. The woman who once wrote some of the most emotionally resonant songs in popular music now experiences the same gradual changes as anyone else reaching that age. The difference is perception. The public still sees the legend. the icon, the creator of Tapestry. But the day-to-day reality is less defined by those achievements. It's defined by routine, by maintenance, by managing the present rather than expanding the future. There's no dramatic collapse, no singular tragic event, just accumulation, time passing, incrementally, and that brings the story closer to its current state. At 84, the structure of life is stripped down. There are fewer obligations, fewer expectations, but also fewer distractions. What remains is a concentrated version of existence. Routine, memory, physical limitation, occasional engagement with the outside world. For Carole King, this stage isn't defined by headlines. It's defined by absence of them. No constant touring schedule. No pressure to release new music. No need to maintain a public persona at all times. That might sound like relief. In some ways it is. But it also introduces a different kind of weight. The transition from constant activity to relative stillness isn't always smooth, especially for someone whose identity was built on creation and output. There's a measurable reduction in stimulation, fewer interactions, less external validation, more time spent in internal reflection. That reflection isn't always comfortable. A life like hers contains multiple layers. Success, yes, but also instability, broken relationships, professional pressures, decisions that had long-term consequences. At this stage, those elements don't disappear. They resurface, not dramatically, but persistently. There's also the physical reality. Energy is finite. Tasks take longer. Recovery is slower. Activities that once felt automatic, playing piano for extended periods, traveling, performing, require more effort. Sometimes they're avoided altogether. That doesn't erase capability. It modifies it. Her connection to music still exists. But it's different now. Less about production, more about memory. Songs she wrote decades ago continue to circulate globally, played on streaming platforms, covered by new artists, used in films and television. That creates a strange dynamic. Her work is active, widely consumed, but she isn't actively participating in that cycle anymore. It's a form of presence without involvement. Financially, she remains stable. The value of her catalog ensures that. But wealth at this stage doesn't fundamentally alter daily experience. Comfort, yes. Security, yes. But not immunity from aging. Social circles shrink. That's a consistent pattern across aging populations. Friends pass away. Colleagues fade from contact. The network becomes smaller. For someone who once operated within a dense professional ecosystem, that reduction is noticeable. There are still connections. Family. Close associates. But the scale is different. Then there's the question of legacy. Publicly, it's secure. Her influence is documented. Her songs are studied. Her impact is acknowledged. Privately, legacy is less abstract. It's tied to memory, to how she processes her own life. What mattered? What didn't? What could have been different? There's no clear answer to those questions. Just ongoing evaluation. The narrative that labels her current life as heartbreaking simplifies a more complex reality. It's not defined by a single tragedy. It's defined by contrast. Peak visibility versus current quiet. Constant output versus reduced activity. Wide social networks versus smaller circles. That contrast can feel stark when viewed externally. But from within, it's often just progression. This is what time does. It compresses. It reduces. It clarifies. At 84, there's less room for expansion. More focus on maintenance, health, routine, stability. She still receives recognition, lifetime achievement awards, tributes, public acknowledgement. But those moments are intermittent. Most days are ordinary. And that's the part that often goes unspoken. The idea that even the most influential figures eventually return to a version of normalcy. No audience, no stage, just time. Her legacy doesn't require constant reinforcement. It exists independently now. The songs are out there, fixed, unchanged, continuing to resonate with listeners who may not even fully connect them to her name. That's both permanence and distance. The creator and the creation become separate over time. And so the story settles into its final phase. Not a dramatic ending. Not a tragic collapse. Just continuation at a slower pace. A life that once moved quickly now measured in quieter increments. Carole King at 84 is not defined by loss alone, nor by success alone. She is defined by the full accumulation of both. And that's where the real reflection begins. Because the question isn't just about her. It's about what happens to anyone who reaches that stage. What remains when the peak has passed? What defines a life when production slows? What matters when recognition becomes occasional instead of constant? Her story doesn't provide clear answers, but it provides a case study, a measurable example of how time reshapes even the most influential lives. And that's where the audience comes in, not just to observe but to consider. Because the arc isn't unique, only the scale is. The outcome, aging, slowing, reflecting, is universal. So the final question isn't about her achievements. It's about perspective. How do we measure a life once the visible markers fade? And what do we choose to value when the noise is gone? If her music once gave people language for their emotions, her life now offers something else. A quieter lesson. One that doesn't play on the radio, but stays longer once understood. If this story made you pause, reconsider, or reflect, even briefly, then it's done its job.